Hey everybody, this is Davey Newlove, your host for the Solar Plus podcast. Welcome to episode 4 for the month of November 2019, and I'm here with co-host Sarah Lozanova.
Hi, Davey.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Man, I can't believe that we're already this deep into November. I mean, what is it? Thanksgiving is next week, and it feels like Halloween was just yesterday.
Right, and it's getting cold.
I know, cold, and I know for me here in Washington, it's getting cold and rainy, so tis the time of season for colder weather to come.
Yeah, and in my area of the country, tis the season for icy solar panels.
Oh man, yeah, and that is a whole new, different beast problem of itself, right there. I'm sure.
Right.
So this month we are going to be talking about education in the solar industry, and to start off, I think a good place to go is how can the solar industry create a more diverse workforce? That's something that education is definitely going to have to drive, and it's kind of interesting to see how the workforce is and what steps might need to be taken to create a diverse workforce.
Yeah, it's a really good question because the solar energy right now is really creating a lot of jobs. And so I think it's really inclusive. It's really important that this be inclusive. And so, for example, um, employing females in the industry, people of color, and so I think it's something for companies to be aware of in the hiring process. But I think it's actually a broader issue than that. It incorporates things like job training and letting young adults like high school age students know about the opportunities so that it's not just kind of a niche market that a few benefit from. But I think a lot of the concepts are similar to things that have been successful with bringing, for example, more women into certain fields. Like I remember when I was in 8th grade attending a whole conference just designated on the topic of women in engineering and mathematics and talking about all the inspiring examples, different career paths, things like that. So I think those kinds of initiatives can be really helpful for engaging more people and more diversity in the workforce.
Yeah, and I think employing employing more women into the solar workforce would be really important because I know that there's numbers that have come out that have just said, women only make up 27% of the solar workforce, and that's really disproportionate to how much of the population women actually make up. So I believe having more women come into the workforce would definitely help. And also having a more diverse workforce, you get more perspectives on problem solving and different ideas to maybe help progress the industry and move forward. And I believe that, the more diverse ideas that we get, the better it will be for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely, which ultimately benefits the end user too.
Absolutely.
And the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's always, the main thing that we really look at with the solar industry is the environment.
Yeah, it has such an opportunity to really help mitigate the climate crisis and a lot of the other issues that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and and you mentioned there real briefly about uh, training a younger workforce and having students at a younger age more involved. And I've been seeing some projects going on at schools where they're building solar arrays at schools to help schools lower their costs. But it's really cool because they're starting to use these students to help install the solar panels and get training for real life work as solar installers. And I think that's really important to reach out to, help people get more aware of, hey, this is actually a really good career opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I work for Sundog Solar a little bit here in Maine, and we've installed municipal projects where there are monitoring capabilities. And some of the projects even have monitoring on the town websites. And so that's also a great way to help educate more people on solar energy. Maybe not as much from an installation end, but just understanding the production and then how that can benefit the community or a corporation.
Yeah, and thinking of that, there's a program from Dominion Energy, and oh, I, it started in Virginia, and it's expanding now to other states in the South and East, and it's solar for students. And this is a program where they actually have the students out there installing, uh, and it's really cool, to see that happening.
Yeah, and I think in general, there's a push in education to try to engage more hands on learning and to really ignite students' passions. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to do that because I think so many young people are aware of the climate crisis and some of them are even kind of upset with, people that are to their senior for not taking more action. So they really see the benefits in it, but then also seeing the opportunities as far as career opportunities. And it's also a great way just to ignite passion and enthusiasm for what they're learning by having the experience of doing something that's hands on.
Yeah, and it's really cool too, where you get to see them see the real uh, payoff. I guess would be the best way to describe it, or at least the end result where they're seeing their work give back to their own school,
Mm-hmm.
and that's got to be really fulfilling and motivating and inspiring, or at least I'd hope it is.
Yeah, and there's been a move, at least in my area, to reduce the operating expenses of schools, to free up those resources for things besides energy bills. So that's also a really inspiring concept is, if we can cut costs, then what else could we do?
Now, as we're talking about schools, I think it'd be important to kind of look at, are there actually any curriculums out there that schools are offering to help with the solar industry, or at least to help educate about solar, or prepare people for the solar workforce? And I
And
haven't
there
really
are in
seen.
fact quite a few programs, Davey. And one thing to keep in mind is that the skill set that's required for this industry is really diverse. So you need, for example, guys mounting solar panels on roofs. You need electricians. You need people that are good at marketing, salespeople, all kinds of things, engineers. So there's really a diverse skill set that's needed. So there's programs that specialize in different areas. Um, like one that I have been researching is at Pasadena City College. They have an electrical technology program, design and installation. And there are some other such programs at community colleges. And this seems, these would tend to be 2-year programs. And then successful participants will qualify to sit for the NABCEP, which I think we'll talk about later, the NABCEP certification. Um, and then there are other programs like I'm a adjunct instructor at Unity College, and I know Unity College up here in Maine, we have a program that is called Sustainable Energy Management. And I know that it deals with renewable energy and also a little bit with energy efficiency. And so this gives students a better understanding of the renewable energy landscape, like learning about things like policies or things that the skills that would be required to run a solar energy business. So that can be a really beneficial skill set, but it kind of depends on the types of jobs that people would like. I also got an MBA from Presidio Graduate School, and they have a program in sustainable management. And so it's not specific to renewable energy, but I think really understanding sustainable business can also be a great skill to bring to the industry. So those are some of the programs just kind of off the top of my head that I've found, but there's quite a few programs, and some of them are more kind of engineering based. Some are a little bit broader and look at a variety of different energy technologies. But like, for example, Oregon Institute of Technology, they have a master's program in renewable energy engineering. Um, and there are other programs like in like sustainable management, like I was speaking about, like with business.
Yeah, and that's really cool. I never really thought of, hey, my training for my web design and media work. I've never really kind of thought like, oh yeah, that kind of trained me for the solar workforce. Well, with that perspective, it actually kind of has. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Because really, a variety of skills are needed to develop the industry. And now there's a lot of larger scale development projects going on, and so understanding things like how to finance or how to develop these types of projects, that would be a really good skill set to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe for some of the other skill sets, you might have to find an actual tech school to help walk you through the program of, learning how to do solar installations. Like you have tech schools that can help teach you some electrical engineering. You might start
Yeah.
seeing some more of these kind of like solar engineering programs popping up all over the place as the industry continues to expand and grow. And I know that's going to be real important because over the next 5 years, solar installers are projected to be one of the fastest, highest growing jobs in the United States. So, getting
Yeah.
a properly trained workforce is going to be very, very important. And I believe that, in the next few years, you're definitely going to see a lot more of these programs popping up.
Yeah, and I think actually not having a properly trained workforce is one of the things that could slow development. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. Another avenue to take too, it's a little bit more of a traditional avenue, but is to become a master or a journeyman electrician, because there's often a real demand for those at solar companies. Having the solar training, I think, can also be really helpful because it reduces the burden on the installer from doing the training. But having that electrical background can really be helpful to solar installation companies. And I think also because there is a relative lack of people with industry experience, a lot of installation companies are willing to offer on the job training. But I think the more you can bring to the table, the easier it is to get hired and to advance.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for us, we've been going through some growth as a company lately, and we're looking for people with experience because we need to make sure that we're still performing and installing up to a high standard. And sometimes finding these experienced people can be a little difficult.
Yeah, it is because it's such a growth industry.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of brings me to next talking point that I think would be good to jump into, and that you mentioned just a little bit ago was NABCEP. And NABCEP is really really intense to get your certification. You have to go through a lot of training courses, uh, hours upon hours of studying, and the exam is very very difficult. But Don went and did it, and he got us the NABCEP certification for the company. Uh, and for people who don't know, NABCEP stands for North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, and they set a really high standard for. Okay, this is how your installation process should go. This is how your installation should look. It's not just providing power, but it also has to be aesthetically pleasing. This is what you do to deal with customers. You know, this is how you have great customer service, and that's really important to learn.
Absolutely. And I think it also really helps set the bar for the industry, so that we don't just kind of have the wild west of solar installation. There's um, kind of a criteria for best practices, and then you can, if somebody has become a certified professional, that they have that knowledge and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The NABCEP certification really is one way that uh, certain solar installers can set themselves apart from others. And that's really important because you do have some companies out there that aren't the best, and you have some companies out there that just kind of seem to be in it for the quick buck to make money and then get out. And unfortunately, they don't really do what's best for the industry or best for the customer. So, when people are going to get a solar installer, making sure that they have a NABCEP certification is going to be one of the most important things that they can do.
Absolutely. And also, if you consider like if you're getting a solar system installed on your roof, you're really going to want that system to be performing 10, 15, 20, even 25 years from now. It's not like a haircut where if you got a bad haircut 5 years ago, it really doesn't, or I would imagine it wouldn't impact your life today, but having an improperly installed solar system could, reduce the output of your solar system. And you might not even know it if it's not being properly monitored.
Right. And with all that, it all goes back to more money being charged to the customer, and that's really kind of that defeats part of the purpose of why people go solar. So having good practices in the industry is really important. And I know to get the NAPSUP certification for a long time, it was real specific. They only had certain dates and certain times that you could take it, and I think it was only like once or twice a year where you could take it. But I know now that they're offering a lot of stuff online, and it's a really good resource. And I was even just looking at the NAPSUP site the other day, and they still have continuing free training webinars that they offer. So that's really
That's
important
great.
to stay up to date on what's currently going on and the best practices.
Yeah, and they're really, there are emerging technologies like batteries are becoming more popular. Um, different, the inverters are having new features. So there really is a lot to stay up on. And so it's important not just to get certified, but to keep that certification current and to be aware of trends and new products and things like that.
Yeah, once you get your first education on how to get into the solar industry, it's definitely a continuing education. Uh, like you mentioned, with new technologies coming out, and uh, making sure that you have the right people to install the products, and especially making sure that they're the right products. That's going to really help the industry continue to grow and sustain itself.
Absolutely. And it's really important because without these kind of quality assurances, the industry could really get a bad name. Like I have some friends that had solar systems installed about 5 years ago and they weren't properly wired. And so microinverters failed on the systems. And so things like that can really impact the output of the system. And so if they had used an AppSep certified installer, I think making such an issue would be much less likely.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. So, moving forward, I think a good place to go from here would be to talk about, how inclusive is the solar industry in terms of educating people into the industry.
That's a really good question. I think it would probably largely vary on a case by case basis. But I think there are some inherent barriers. Like traditionally, the trades tend to be industries that are dominated by men, and um, and so I think you're likely to see, as far as actual installers, that there's more male installers. But I think a lot of the other aspects of the job, um, there might be a lot more gender balance. But that's a really good question. I'm not sure I really have my finger on the pulse of that.
Yeah, and I know for us, this is stuff that I talked about with Don a little bit. With Don uh, being half black and half Irish, he definitely brings a very unique perspective and a point of view that for me a lot of times I don't normally think of, and it's really really good to hear and bounce ideas off of each other. And it's really interesting too because the solar industry is very much dominated by white people,
Mm-hmm.
but we're looking for ways to make it more diverse, because when you open it up to more diversity, you also kind of it goes hand in hand with opening it up to other communities that might not have had access to solar or the industry, or just to information that might help them go solar.
Especially now that solar has become so cost competitive with other sources of energy. It's not, a lot of people are installing solar largely for cost savings and not, exclusively for the environmental motives. So I think it's particularly important to make these technologies available to low and moderate income households.
Yeah, and that's definitely one way that the industry is going to continue to grow and improve.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good thing for solar companies to be aware of, the presidents and the people doing the hiring, like the HR departments and such, to be considering these things.
Absolutely. And I think, from there, a good thing to look at is, since we're going to be transitioning from more of these fossil fuels and coal to cleaner renewable energy, uh, it would be a good idea to talk about, how can the solar industry train former workforces to get to, you know, help them get to the future of energy. And more specifically, I'm thinking like, how can we reach out to the coal industry and help get them to switch over? Because yeah, we don't really want to use coal anymore just because of the environmental hazards and health hazards. Uh, how do we make sure that we don't just completely cut off and leave behind people in those industries? How can we include them and help bring them into the future?
Yeah, I know there was a real movement a couple years ago to retrain coal workers in other fields. And I think this is super important because with any change in the market, there's going to be some industries that are in decline and others that are growing. And so certainly you don't want to disenfranchise people and leave them behind. And the skill set that they have may or may not be applicable to other industries. So in my opinion, I think education and um, on the job training are some of the best ways to retool people's skill set and to really keep them competitive. And so it makes sense, to look at what industries are in decline and where skills could be becoming obsolete and which skills are really sought after. So I think that's where the connection between coal and solar comes in, and also just sort of the fact that there have been so many coal power plants closing down. So it's clearly on a trajectory downward, the industry as a whole, whereas solar is kind of the opposite. It's growing almost exponentially. So I think certainly educational programs that give these workers the skills to stay competitive are a great idea. And another thing that's nice about solar jobs is that there are solar companies in every state, and they tend to, there tend to be more in large urban areas, particularly in states like California or Massachusetts or Hawaii, where there's a really strong solar industry. But there are solar installers all over the country. So there's, urban solar jobs, there's rural solar jobs, there's quite a nice geographic range of solar jobs as well.
Yeah, and I think, one of the best ways to help train a workforce, um, and especially from former, energies, is to really reach out and try to help bring them along. I think, well, in my opinion, one really good idea is, instead of having the government give subsidies for these coal power plants, why not use those subsidies to retrain the workforce to renewable energy? It doesn't necessarily have to be solar; it could be wind, or it could even be hydropower. And
Yeah, or even energy
that could
efficient.
really tap into a already kind of experienced workforce. Just give them a little bit of a new skill set.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great idea, and that would really help further the transition, away from fossil fuels and towards cleaner sources.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the whole ultimate end game with the solar industry as well. This question just popped in my head, but do you think that as solar continues to grow and get more popular, that you're going to see a lot more of these programs start popping up? To me, it would make sense to see that, but I'm just not entirely sure if it's quite there yet.
Yeah, I would say that we are quite there because even in Maine, where solar is taking off, but it's not nearly as developed as it is in say, California or something, um, we have a really hard time finding qualified solar installers. when there are open positions. And we rarely have people with experience apply, so, or with formal training specific to solar energy. So I would imagine that this is a phenomenon that a lot of installers are experiencing. And so I would say the industry is already there, that this would be very beneficial.
Yeah,
I mean,
and the
also
definitely help carry us into a cleaner future. That's for sure.
yeah, and it also helps businesses because it is a disadvantage to be in an industry where you have to train all your own workers. You know, like in a lot of, like, say, an accounting firm would hire people with accounting degrees. So it does put the industry at a disadvantage to not be able to hire people with applicable training. So these types of programs would help move the industry forward. You know, reduce the need to do so much on the job training, for example.
Right. And I know that later in the podcast we're going to have a rep from Grid Alternatives coming on the program. But I think it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about Grid Alternatives. Are you familiar with them at all?
No, I'm not.
They do some really cool work, and I know that when Don was going to school, he worked with them on some installs, and he got some really good hands-on training. And I'll let Don and Adewale talk about that in a little bit. But uh, just wanted to bring up that Grid Alternatives does great work. They're one of the best education services when it comes to the solar industry and training proper installers. So you mix that in with the NABCEP certification, and you're gonna have a guy like Don that I just called the solar guru. If you have any questions about solar, just go to Don and he'll hook you up. He's got it good.
It sounds excellent. I look forward to hearing the interview.
So yeah, and from there, I think we're pretty good, and we've covered a lot, and hopefully it's all good information for everybody. And I hope that we entertained and educated, and people enjoyed.
Thanks for listening.
Hello, greetings, everyone. This is Don Tonic, live and direct, coming at you from Atlanta, Georgia, with our segment, with our guest segment for the month of November. The topic for this month is all about education. So we thought one of the best candidates that we could get is one of my longtime connections in the industry, who actually was around from day one almost, helped get me on the path that's led me here today. I'll go ahead and get into it. He's the workforce development manager for Grid Alternatives out in California, and his name is Adewale OgunBadejo. How you doing, bro?
I'm good. I'm happy to be on this call.
Indeed. It has been a while. Guess we'll jump into tell us who you are and what you do and how you got involved with Grid and what Grid is all about.
Yeah, so I'm the workforce development manager for Grid Alternatives Greater Los Angeles. I've been with the organization since 2002. I originally got here kind of as a change in careers for myself. I was working at the community college, not the community college, but at a local college here in Los Angeles, Cal State Dominguez, and I had heard about solar. Knew nothing about it back at that time. It was about 2008. Actually had an uncle introduce me to it, and was fortunate to go overseas to Vietnam to look at a solar project. And I was like, anything that can get me to Vietnam, I need to study a little bit deeper. So I picked up a class up at Los Angeles Trade Technical College, got a certificate from Trade Tech in solar, and then found out about Grid Alternatives. And when I started the organization, we were probably 30 or 40 people total across the organization. And today We're closer to 350 individuals across the country, with a few international projects going on as well.
Oh man, when would you say that time when you started was? How long ago? How many years?
I started with the organization in 2010.
Okay, so it's been 9 years.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah, next August I believe will be my 10th.
And then you came on right around the time that I came in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. I remember meeting you and you going through the progressions and kind of learning the industry. So to see where you are today is just amazing, man. I think you're a testimony to perseverance and what we can do together to push into this industry.
Man, I appreciate that greatly. So just give a little more background to the audience. Adewale actually, all the workers are volunteers. So right when I started solar school, one of the first things they told me that, to really help my career, one of the two things I needed to do besides passing the NABCEP test was to get all the installs I could under my belt with Grid for free. So they told me about Adewale, and so I met him, and Adewale wound up literally scheduling me on the first roof I ever climbed on with Grid, and that was a special day. Climbing the ladder. That first day, I knew nothing about being on the roof. So thanks for getting me in.
Yeah.
I know it was real busy back then. It's hard to get the jobs in LA. I wound up going to San Diego a lot, but
Yeah.
Let's continue. Let's get into our next.
Yeah, your
question.
perseverance was amazing. Amazing, and I think that's where we see a lot of success at.
Yeah, I wound up, joining the, the roof lead and the ground lead training programs, which were, held to a very high level. So kind of just, and it took X amount of time to mark off all the skill boxes you guys have, because it's very organized the way the training for the lead installers are. And it was not easy. You had to get enough volunteer days in, and in LA there was a huge amount of people on the list. I'm sure it still is, and getting enough installs before I got out of school that 9 months was a tough window. So that's what led me to driving out to San Diego and installing a lot with them as well. But I knew I had a very limited time to try to hit that goal while I was before I got out of school and actually went to work. So but man, I came flying out of the gates because of y'all, for sure. I mean, my experience was to this day, it's the foundation of definitely on my roof, everything I do on the roof,
That's great.
So let's talk for a bit here about, what you think is the importance of training a more diverse workforce with grid alternatives.
Yeah, in terms of a more diverse workforce, I think we understand that there's a transition happening as we move away from a carbon-based economy. And there's a tremendous opportunity to put people back to work as, the country and really the world redevelops our energy infrastructure. We know that we have to move away from fossil fuels. You look at things like what's going on in terms of climate change, and out here in California, it's burning all the time. There's always these large fires. There's floods everywhere. So we know we have to move away from a carbon-based economy and, start really developing renewable energy technologies. So that's an environmental issue, but it's also an economic issue because there's a tremendous amount of money being invested into renewable energy technologies and then the whole clean and green infrastructure. And we want to make sure that people from underserved communities, which are traditionally people of color a lot of times, don't miss the boat on this, economic opportunity. At the same time, a lot of these communities are considered frontline communities who have typically kind of bared the heaviest burden from the use of fossil fuels and the pollution that's created from, traditional power plants, transportation corridors, industrial zones, and other kind of environmentally detrimental structures that are typically sited close to these frontline communities. So, as we make this transition, we need to make sure that people from these communities and those individuals have the opportunity to be participants in the transition to the clean energy economy.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I know there's stats. I don't have the exact stats at the moment, but I was something to the effect of out of all the new jobs that are created, I think only 20% is going to minorities. So there is a big push to make sure that it's more diversified and more inclusive. And on the administrative level, it's something like 1 out of 10 is a minority. So,
wow,
we definitely not only need to train a more diverse workforce, but a workforce that's going to be able to climb the ranks eventually and move into upper management and eventually ownership as well. So, what are the resources that are available to help train a new generation? What do you think?
Yeah, I think in terms of resources, I mean, as you were saying earlier, GRID is probably one of the biggest resources available. The only issue is GRID is not really nationwide just yet, right? I think the first thing you have to really have is the right policies in place to encourage the wider industry. One reason that GRID Alternatives has been able to be so successful, particularly in California, is because the policies are in place to encourage growth in the industry. About 1 out of every 4 solar jobs are right here in California. But if you kind of look under the hood, you'll see that it's because of progressive policies that have encouraged continued investment in the industry. So the first thing you have to have is the right policies in place. And then once you have the right policies in place, you'll see the growth of the industry kind of from a company side where the companies are starting to grow. You're seeing more and more of the Teslas, companies like Sunrun will move in. Then you have your mid-levels and your kind of mom and pop shops. So once you know there's a job market, now there's a case for kind of creating the training because there's a demand in that particular community. And that's when you begin to see the community colleges developing programs, the vocational programs popping up, and then it's really about having an organization like GRID Alternatives that's going to go and provide the hands-on training and finding that nexus between the community colleges, the vocational training programs, the implementation of the hands-on training component, and then having the connection between all of that and the actual industry employers. And that's what kind of we've been able to do as we've grown our workforce development program out here in GRID Alternatives, but particularly in California and in Los Angeles.
I was kind of curious, who exactly came up with the model? You know what I mean? Like where did how did GRID evolve as far as going from just a concept to sort of a functional training organization that it became?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when we started, it was always kind of written into our mission, when Tim Sears and Erica Mackey first started the organization, but there was more of a heavy emphasis at the time of just actually installing these systems for families. And I think once we became sustainable and we kind of began to understand that part, we could focus more on the equity, part in terms of the job training. And more and more schools where they were teaching solar started to come to us, and individuals from the classroom wanted some hands-on, and we kind of
like my school did, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we saw that need. I mean, I can remember in 2011 saying that we needed to switch, where we had the majority of individuals coming to us really just wanted to give back to the community or kind of learn about solar, maybe to put on their own homes or whatever the case. But we needed to start to place more emphasis on working with these different organizations and schools to get their people trained up and move them into jobs. So around 2011, 2012, we began to see this shift, and we began to become more and more intentional as an organization around workforce development. And actually, that's when we began to create a workforce development department. Before that, it was just really a volunteer and training, kind of component to the work we did. But as time went on, we began to formalize partnerships with, the community colleges like out here, Los Angeles Trade Technical College. Los Angeles Trade Tech was one of the first community colleges in the country with a renewable energy program or renewable energy two-year degree, so we formalized our workforce development program. And, over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, there's really been a heavy emphasis on job training around green energy. There's a lot of foundation dollars as well as state and federal dollars because they too realize, the high growth in the solar industry, the demand for trained workers who actually know about solar. And the question is, how do we get them trained up? And Grid kind of has that model. If you look at the industry in 2010, there were about 93,000 solar jobs. And today there's over 240,000 jobs in the solar industry. So, that's tremendous growth. People need jobs, but we have to train these people. And by training these people, it also helps the industry to continue to grow and be more vibrant.
Man, I know it's been cool because I think I remember along the way, one or two of the guys who, without a doubt, would have passed tech school and all of the courses, went out on Grid with us for the very first day. Had never been on a roof before, and climbed halfway up the ladder and got stuck. Like the people that climbed halfway up a ladder and got kind of like afraid.
Yeah.
And we would have to talk them down. It would take us a good 10 minutes to get them back down off the ladder. So they would have aced all their courses in tech school, but if it wasn't for Grid exposing their fear of heights right out of the gates, you know what I'm saying? Like they might have wasted a lot of their time. It was kind of thing where, and for me, I really enjoyed it personally because, everything I was trying to picture in my mind, I had no experience previously. I'm trying to picture in my mind what the books were talking about on a lot of things. And actually getting on a roof and getting my hands on it and learning what tool we used to do it. And, it gave me, I think it helped me pass the exam side of things because I had a point of reference, from climbing the ladder and drilling into the roof and feeling that sensation in your hands and banging with the hammer looking for the rafters, that kind of stuff, So it's kind of I think Grid was great to kind of weed out the people that just physically weren't conditioned to be working on the roofs. And I, when I came out of school, I basically was because of the team leader program, already a very capable installer before I even made a dime. You know what I'm saying? I put in X amount of hours, like a decent amount of free hours before I ever made a dime. I think that's kind of humbling as well. And we were down there in Compton. I mean, everywhere we were at. Well, why don't you tell us real quick the criteria of how the families actually get picked to be to get an installation on their house?
Yeah, so with our residential program, a homeowner has to meet a certain income criteria. Usually it's 80% of the AMI But depending on the program, and when I say AMI, I mean the area median income for that particular county. But other programs where it could be as low as 30% of the AMI. We don't run credit checks or anything like that. So you have to meet the income requirements. You have to have a solar suitable roof. And out here in California, you have to fall into what's considered a DAC, or disadvantaged communities, environmentally and economically disadvantaged communities map. And if you meet those three criteria, then you're pretty much on your way. And, we install the systems at no cost for the homeowners, but they get all the savings.
Yeah, we would drive to some of the most impoverished parts of, the metro area and San Diego area. And, it would usually be a husband and a wife and, numerous kids. And, we could tell they were people that, they were, low-income families that had high power bills because they had so many people in one house, So I personally, it felt really good to know that I was helping people. I mean, they would make lunch for us, and we bond. We spend even today whenever we're doing a residential install. We spend a lot of days on end sometimes at someone's house and interacting with their family and their pets, and help and pick up trash in their yard. You know what I mean? Like we bond with the family whether we want to or not as installers.
Yeah.
And I always felt really good about the fact that it really helped those families.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of goodwill that comes out of the work we do. And I think that's also the model, whether we're in nonprofit or for-profit, right? We should have some genuine concern for those that we're serving. Our motto at Grid is people, planet, employment. Serving the people, doing our part to help the planet, and then training people so that they can get good jobs in the industry. But we want to make sure that whether again we're in the nonprofit or for-profit world, that the concern is genuine. You have companies out here that all they care about is the dollar, and they'll put 100 panels on your roof on the north facing side, or right in the middle of some shade. They don't care. They just want the money. So if we're gonna do this right, you want to make sure that you have people that really care. And I guess that would be another reason to have a diverse industry, because these individuals can also connect with the same communities that they come from. One thing since you've left, and as our program has expanded, we've also moved into doing affordable housing, as well as installing for mission-aligned nonprofits.
Cool.
And then the other thing we do is we have target populations. So we work a lot with formerly incarcerated individuals. We work with women. We work with opportunity youth or at-risk youth, depending on how you want to term them. But like you said, we've seen these people get on the roof. We work with individuals who have done 30 years in prison. They come out and they're ready for another chance. And they generally are some of the hardest working people you'll see. They get trained out, and now, we got a couple of them in the electrical union. Some are working for medium level companies. Some have even moved on to some of the bigger companies. But you see the diversity there, and you see people feeling good about themselves and doing something they know that's good for the environment and good for the community.
Man, it's a model unparalleled. All of my years at this point, I still have yet to see a model that incorporates all of those details that you mentioned. So definitely props to Grid. Earlier, you touched briefly on Tim and Erica. Can you give us a little background real quick about who they are and how they, where their idea came from and how they're originated in San Francisco, yeah?
Yeah, they originated in Bay Area. They were both professional engineers.
What's their name again?
Erica Mackey and Tim Sears.
Got it.
And they were both, professional engineers who were doing a lot of large-scale renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, kind of in the private sector.
Like SunPower with
And
SunPower for yeah.
yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And they saw that, hey, this solar technology is great, but they saw also that only a certain percentage of the population actually had access to it, and it was typically wealthier people. Well, not even typically; it was almost exclusively wealthy people.
Cali's
Yeah.
based on home ownership as far as y'all's program. So the
Yeah.
amount of minorities that even own a home in California is staggeringly low because of the prices.
Yeah, exactly. And back then there were no leasing programs in place for solar. So if you wanted a solar system, you would have to come out of pocket $60,000-$70,000, and the only people that were wealthy people, and they were typically white people. So they said, hey, if we're gonna make this transition, we want to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. And that's when they started to develop the grid alternatives model, where they could, make it accessible for low-income communities, and also do the training and create these clean energy pathways. They actually did their first installation in 2004, or their first two installations in 2004 in San Francisco. And they actually got together with their friends and some other stakeholders and raised the money themselves to install those first two systems for free. And by 2016, the California Solar Initiative had come online, which was part of the cap and trade dollars. And there was a carve out for low-income families, to encourage low-income families to go solar as well. And Grid at the time was the only ones doing the work. So we became the program managers for the SAS program, which is the solar single-family affordable solar homes program. And that's really what it allowed us to expand throughout California, where we opened 7 offices in California by 2016. And then, today we have an office in Colorado, as well as an office in DC. And we do international work. We have an office in Nicaragua. We do work in Nepal, and we do orphanages in Mexico. So, from those first 2 installations that they did, back in San Francisco, Erica always says that she can't imagine, that it would have grown to what it is today. She was taken aback. She always said that they thought they had arrived, after they did those first 2 installations. So their impact has been so great, and they've changed so many people's lives, man. Me personally, I can't thank them enough. Thank them enough for what they've done, and given so many of us a platform, to empower others. So they're really great people.
Is there any sort of just rough number on how many kilowatts or megawatts have been installed by Grid at this point?
Yeah, I mean, here in LA, I know we've installed for 1,900 families, which is tremendous. Yeah, and then kind of on a national level, we've done, what is the number? If I remember correctly, we've installed for close to, I think, served close to 15,000 households, and we're nearing $400 million in lifetime savings for families. And I think we're also nearing 1 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions as well.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're extremely proud. Here in LA, we've also helped over 500 individuals since 2012 to move into jobs in the solar industry. And like yourself, some of those individuals have also started their own companies. So it's really a great ecosystem at this point. Yourself, like you as a business owner are now able to hire and bring in others that are looking for opportunities. And we see it all the time. We have individuals in almost every solar company out here in Los Angeles, that
Man,
have
that's
trained
reach.
grid alternatives.
That's reach right there. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we hope to see that on a national level, that same, sort of result that y'all created out there. And
yeah,
I like that how you mentioned the CSI, the California Solar Initiative. If anyone doesn't know about that, they should really Google it and look it up, because it's sort of it's that state level support that set the precedent for y'all to even grow into California as much as you have. So props to the state of California for doing that. We're winding down on time here, so I'm going to get kind of into our last question, which is where does how does Grid acquire all of the materials that's used as far as the solar panels and inverters, that kind of stuff?
yeah. Well, we have partnerships with a lot of the panel manufacturers as well as the inverter manufacturers. We've had a partnership with Enphase for a
Yep.
long time,
Yeah.
where we get discounted material, sometimes in-kind material in exchange. A lot of times that we're able to kind of market some of these products for the companies. But that's how we source most of our materials, through partnerships with the manufacturers themselves. And we've had some great partnerships over the years. Like I said, Enphase, SunPower has been another great partner. We have a couple of racking partners as well.
Yeah. Man, yeah. So you have the volunteer as far as the workforce that actually does the work. And then you have state legislation, as you mentioned, kind of supporting on one side, and then you have the solar vendors themselves actually contributing discounts on materials as the third component. And it's great to see it all come together like that.
Absolutely. It makes for a wholesome industry, for sure.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a model that's unparalleled, and an example of just how easy it can be done. Maybe not easily, but definitely, a template that can be, we can generate the same results. I mean, I know you and I will talk off air, which we have, and we will continue about how we can expand here on the East Coast, and how we can get Grid here to Georgia and the Southeast. So we can apply that template and try to achieve the same results that y'all had, because we
absolutely
we at Solar Plus definitely want to be involved with training the future, and keeping the workforce at a very highly trained skill level. So
we would love to be a part of that.
Yeah. By God willing, we gonna make it happen, man. Because there's our industry is really starting to pick up here. If we could get some state level support, I think all kinds of things can happen. And if they said give you guys a good invitation along with the movie industry to come down here and spread that California sunshine with us.
Yes, sir.
But it's hot down here, so we used to sweating. That's why we drink all that sweet tea.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm gonna have you leave it off here. What's the future of Grid looking like? And what's the future for your own personal career looking like?
Yeah, I think the future of Grid is really bright. Like you said, this is a model that hasn't really been replicated too many other places yet. We understand where the solar industry is growing or going. We're here for the right reasons. We want to see people get trained up and move into these good green jobs. And, California is just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of the country is going to follow one way or the other, just as the world is, because we know we have to move some more sustainable forms of energy. And we're going to need to train people up, and we want to make sure that people don't miss the boat. So we're going to get it done. We're excited. Grid's in a great place. I'm in a great place. I've learned so much from this organization. It's been empowering. I've seen so many people become successful, get jobs, lives have been changed. It's been my inspiration for the last decade, just to see people, who literally had no expectations sometimes, to now having these green careers and feel like they're going somewhere in life. And, I think that's something that we should continue to push, to give people opportunities, man. That's what people need. So that's the work we can do. It can be replicated across the nation. We just have to have the right people in place. So yeah, and I want to see more about what you're doing down there, and how I can support you, and how organizations like Grid can support people like you who are also on the ground doing the work.
That is what's up, man. Oh man, yes. Thank you, Grid Alternatives. And real quick, let the people know how they can get a hold of you and how they can ask y'all questions, and how can they find yourself and get more info on Grid.
Yeah, you can get more info on Grid by going to gridalternatives.org. That's Grid Alternatives with an S.org. You can look at our office specifically by going to gridla.org. My email is aogunbadejo@gridalternatives.org. And feel free to send me an email whenever. I would be happy to connect with you.
Adewale OgunBadejo, thank you so much for being on the show with us today, man. It's a pleasure to have been on this journey with you all the last decade or so, and we wish you many more.
Thank you, Don, man. It's so good to connect with you again, and man, so happy to know that you're still pushing. You're making it happen. I wish you continued success, and look forward to working with you soon, brother.
Thank you, bro. All
right. Take care.
All right. So that's gonna wrap our show up for the month. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, has any questions or anything, they can find me at Don DON at Solar Plus LLC SolarPlusLLC.com. Check us next month, and we'll continue this journey, man. We appreciate all our podcast supporters, and what can I say, man? Go solar.
Go solar.